Welcome to the MenTell Health Podcast. Well, technology has failed me. Or maybe I failed technology. Depends which way you want to look at it. Anyways, I tried to record this episode as the previous episodes, both video and audio, so I can upload it on any podcasting apps and also on YouTube. However, I tried something new this time. I tried to be clever. I tried to record directly into my editing software, and somehow the camera and the microphone weren't synced speed-wise, so the image was way slower than the sound, and I didn't manage to adjust it. So this week's episode will be audio only on YouTube again, like my early ones. I apologize, and I hope you don't think I'm completely incapable of technology, because I am. Anyways, I hope you still enjoyed the episode. It was a difficult one to record, so I'm extra sad that it failed, because I do reference the video quite often. And I try to it was an emotional episode. Anyways, enjoy, and I hope I see you again, but you will definitely hear me again next week. Welcome to the MenTell Health Podcast. I'm Tim, and I invite you to join me on my journey to talk about men's mental health. Before we begin, as always, a brief disclaimer. I am in no shape or form a mental health professional. I'm just a man who wants to talk about men's mental health. This is a difficult episode for me to record, because I'm going to talk about domestic violence and abuse, and it's personally difficult for me for two reasons. The first of which being that women are still the majority of victims of domestic violence and abuse, and men are by almost 98% the dominant perpetrators of domestic violence and abuse. And unfortunately, when women talk about the abuse and violence they experience, they are often not believed, or the punishment does very rarely fit the crime. I have women in my personal life who I know and who I'm very close with, who've had to experience the injustice and the belittlement by the police after experiencing violence and abuse in relationships. Men are taught to be violent in our society. The role model of the man is the alpha male, the man that solves problems by violence. And unfortunately, when women talk about their experiences, it can quickly become a whataboutism, where men point to other men who may have had some experience like this. And this is not supposed to be something that takes the space of women who are in need of being acknowledged when they talk about the abuse and the violence they experience. This is meant to be a space for men to talk about their experiences as well, because the cycle of violence can only stop when we break it. And unfortunately, if people, or if men, are not believed when they share their experiences, it is quite, I don't want to say easy, but the threshold gets lower and lower the more people feel like they're not taken seriously. And if you're then also taught to be violent in a society that only values you for your aggressiveness, then victims can become perpetrators. I'm not saying every victim will become a perpetrator. I'm not saying every perpetrator will become a victim. But the space we need to create and widen for women to be believed, we also need to create for men. Because whilst the majority of victims are women, there is still a third of the victims are men. And just like with women, who in many cases do not report the abuse they experience or don't take into account when the statistics are being made, so are a lot of men not coming forth with their experiences or aren't taken seriously when they do, and the actual figures could therefore be much, much higher than the official statistics proclaim them to be. And the numbers are grey on both sides, where sometimes when the crime, the abuse by a woman is only recognized, whereas it happened because the man has been abusing for a long time. And sometimes it's the other way around, which makes this such a difficult topic, and which sees how the cycle is happening, where violence breeds violence, and that's why we need to talk about it. In any case. Now, I just said that sometimes people, and men and women alike, don't report the abuse they experience because sometimes they don't actually realize what they're experiencing is abuse. People, unfortunately, a characteristic of us humans is that we get used to things quite quickly. We establish a new status quo very easily. So the definition of what abuse is can be different for everyone, when maybe it shouldn't be. And abuse, when in a relationship where the man is the victim of the abuse, especially in heterosexual relationships, the abuse can look quite different to how in the public eye abuse is perceived. In relationships where the woman is the victim, there is a very clear strength imbalance, where the perpetrator is strong and dominating in many, many, many cases. When the woman is the perpetrator and the man is the victim, that strength imbalance is not on the perpetrator's side, which makes the hitting, the slapping, the kicking, the spitting, the scratching, the pushing, the yelling, the shouting seem less severe. Seem like, oh, the man can take it because he's so much stronger. I mean, of course, we can take it. We have to take it. Men who've been in abusive relationships as the victim have reported that the abuse is not always only physical, but quite often emotional. It can be quite often very heavy verbal abuse, belittling, humiliating in front of other people or only at home. It can be possessive acts of jealousy. It can be micromanaging, controlling even every aspect of the life, restricting friendships, restricting movement, restricting liberty and freedom, trying to control how the money is spent, make false allegations to their friends or to your friends about you, the employer or the police, in the worst cases even. They threaten to leave and separate you. They threaten with self-harm if you leave them. So the violence is quite often not physically directed at the man, but directed at themselves. But obviously men in same-sex relationships experience the very, very similar, experiences to women in heterosexual relationships experience with this. A lot of violence, both verbally and physically, a lot of violence, rape, strong and heavy abuse in every shape or form. I found it helpful in my own experience, which I will talk about later in the episode, to focus on how I felt in the relationship, to realize or notice whether or not I was in a abusive relationship or not. Because like I just said, it can be difficult for men to recognize. For one, because the symptoms aren't as we perceive them in society. They're not as violent quite often, and if they are, they're meant to take it in both same-sex relationships, because men being, physical with other men is seen as normal and how it's supposed to be, taking out their aggression on each other, and men being hit and physically attacked by women are supposed to take it as well, because they are the stronger ones physically. These are not just my experiences, but some that I have been told, and also they have been collected on specific help websites, which will be in the description of this episode. If in a relationship you feel afraid or anxious to please your partner, if you feel that you go along with everything your partner says and does, and not because you are a people pleaser, but because you're afraid of the consequences of going against your partner's will, if you check in often with your partner to report where you are and what you're doing, because they make it clear that that is what they want, that is what they need, not because that is something that you want or need. That you receive frequent harassing phone calls from your partner, that you worry about your partner's temper, and you worry about what mood they're in when you come home, sometimes so much so that you do not actually want to come home, that they have very possessive tendencies, very jealous tendencies, and there's all of this is a spectrum. Of course, jealousy in a relationship can be very normal, but it can be very excessive, where it is unhealthy and can become abusive. If you have physical injuries, if you have injuries you make up towards your friends and family and colleagues, the reason why you have them, if you have to miss work or other events because of injuries, if you are dressing in a way that hides bruises, if you are restricted from seeing family and friends, if you rarely go out in public with your partner, or if you feel you need to go out more with your partner because they are different, they act and behave differently towards you in public, so you crave public people, more people around you, just to feel secure and safe. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes outside with people, they treat you worse, so you don't want to go out with them. You have limited access to money, or they overlook all of your spending. You feel the need to hide feelings. You feel the need to hide things you did. You feel the need to hide conversations you had, thoughts you had, due to the stress of having to face the sometimes very, very severe consequences of that. You have difficulty eating, either too little or too much, because of the amount of stress you feel when you are close to your partner, or when there has been a conflict with your partner, or sometimes just being with your partner. You question your own reality, whether or not this is how a relationship is supposed to be or not, and many, many other things that you can ask yourself and check in with yourself if that is something you experience and find not good, and maybe not helpful in a relationship. And most of the things I've just said are so extreme that they should never occur in a relationship. Unfortunately, with most people that have been or are in abusive relationships, people who do not have experienced any of those things question why would they not just leave? Why would they not just go? And there's different reasons for everyone. There are some different reasons that apply more to women, and there are some that apply more to men. I think a big reason for men, and not only I think, but also what I've read on several websites of testimonials of men who have been in these kind of abusive relationships, is shame. They feel ashamed that they have been in such a relationship because they're meant to be strong. They're meant to be able to defend themselves. They're meant to be able to dominate even. But they're not only that, they also feel ashamed that they've let it maybe sometimes gone as far as it has and not intervened sooner, that they let themselves be treated that way, feel ashamed of having had so little self-worth. Both with men and women, there's a lack of resources. There's a lack of funding. There has been, which I've read, was a man who didn't know where to go, what to do. He called a hotline that was meant for women to get out of abusive relationships, and on the phone they told him that they didn't have the funding to help them, which is sad in two ways, because for one, that probably means they don't have much funding to help the women in the first place, and second, that there wasn't anywhere the man could turn to. Both things need to change dramatically, and some have changed and some unfortunately have not. Some people are also in denial for a long time, because it couldn't possibly have happened to them, and the person loves them, because in most abusive relationships the people are, or the abusers are very vocal about reassuring their love every time after something bad has happened, sometimes before something bad happens as well. So they may wonder, but the person loves me, they say they love me, and they treat me so nice in many times, and the bad times may not be that bad after all. In some cases, they want to protect their children, if there are any. They also feel threatened by the prospect of violence against the other person. So the abuser threatens to hurt themselves if the person that is being abused leaves them. If they're in a same-sex relationship, they may have not come out to their family and friends yet, and feel if they leave the partner, they will be they will do that for them. Sometimes they're meant to believe it's their own fault and they deserve it, or that they have done something in the relationship that triggered this, and that's why it's happening. So they are at fault, they are to blame, and many other reasons that lead people to stay in those relationships. And if you've never been in an abusive relationship in any shape or form, and you have people in your life who have been, or you meet people that have been, it is easy to forget that these people have been traumatized for a long time. And the question, why didn't you leave, may come to your lips. And I would urge you to ask it in your head, or listen to this again and take these as answers, whether or not they apply to the person you're talking to or not. Because that's one of the worst questions anyone could ask a person that has been to a traumatic event. Because what you're actually implying with that question is, it's your fault, isn't it? You could have made it go away quicker. You could have done something sooner. So it's a bit your fault, which it isn't. And so nobody should make to feel that way. Yes. Now we come to the second reason. I find recording this episode difficult. The very observant listener may have noticed that at the beginning of the episode I only mentioned one, and here comes the second. you may notice that I'm dragging it out a bit. Yes. The second reason is that even though I have talked to people about my experience and have been affirmed in my belief, and I've just read out many statements or reasons why people might think it's not true, I with my experience and still feel not valid to talk about myself having been in an abusive relationship, because many people have had way worse experiences, and if anybody else would tell me that my experience is worse than them, I would still take theirs seriously. So it's just, of course, I don't take mine as seriously. I also, of course, have told all of these people I've told about it only my perspective. So maybe I've been hiding things, even though I haven't. But it's, possible I may have repressed stuff that I've done. Though I can say for 100% that I've never, ever been physical with anyone. Or hurt anyone. So I can say that for one. Yeah. And also, yes, like I said, people have had it worse, and the person I was in a relationship with only hit me once and spat in my face twice. Once on my birthday, though. So you be the judge if that's bad enough. Now, let's talk about my experiences. No more hiding. Much. This person who I've been in a relationship with quite a long time ago, it is not my current partner, and also not the person I've been with before. I'm going to refer to them as they, because I'm sharing my story here, and I'm not going to, doesn't matter who they are. I don't know if they would even recognize themselves. That's not really the point of this. The point of this is to share my experiences and to encourage other people to share theirs. As I've just said, the person who I was in a relationship with only physically attacked me once. Unless you count the spitting, then it's 3 times. So it took me a long time to recognize other things that happened in that relationship as forms of abuse. And some of them I still don't really see, but they've had a big impact on my life and also on my ability to be in healthy relationships since. It's quite interesting if you have experiences before that are positive, then you have one traumatic experiences, and they shape you way more sometimes than the positive ones beforehand. Annoying how our brains work that way sometimes. Annoying, yes. Every time after any of those 3, if you count the spitting, physical attacks on me happened, I said it was fine. I went back and I told them it was no problem. It was all fine, because I didn't want to blame them. Well, at least I didn't want there to be conflict anymore. I wanted it to be done, and I wanted the harmony to exist in this relationship. Any other things that happened? Let's start early on. Quite quickly after we've gotten together, there was a lot of pressure suddenly that we needed to move in together. And any hesitation of me was seen as a sign of love withdrawal, or of taking things not seriously, or just being not in the relationship. And even before that, the very first weekend they and I spent together, we got into a hypothetical argument about something I've said that lasted for 2 hours or even longer. I don't actually remember, which mostly consisted of them arguing me down for my own thoughts and feelings. And by the end of it just stopped. There was no resolution or anything. They just stopped, said, okay, let's go on with the day. And then we went on with the day. It was never addressed again. But those became very, very frequent conversations or arguments that basically were about nothing other than telling me how wrong or bad I was about anything I did. And later in the relationship, most of them resulted in them forcing me out of the flat we were in. Most of the time it was theirs, because for many different reasons. Some reasons very legitimate that we stayed at their place. Other reasons it was more like I had to come to them. It was not nice because it made me lose friendships. It made me lose contact with quite a lot of people. It made me miss out on things that I would have otherwise had the chance to experience, and it put a lot of pressure on me and stress on me that I always had to go there. Anyways, the fights and arguments accumulated in them throwing me out. So I came with a backpack, stayed one night, which was fine. The second night it became like a ritual. It was mostly almost every time, if not every other time. I came there, everything was nice, we had a good time. Then the argument started on mostly the second day. They threw me out. I had to pack all my shit up. They threatened with the police if I wouldn't leave. Even if I was adamant about, no, let's stay, let's talk this out. No, I had to leave. I had to pack my shit up. I had to go. But I wasn't allowed to go on a train, because then I would be bad even more. So I didn't, out of fear. I was just frozen. So I just ran around the city until messaging them for sometimes hours, until they eventually said, you can come back now. Come back, and we made up, and then we moved on, and then we did the same again. Once I went home, just the once. Did not go over well. It wasn't just that, though. It wasn't just the arguments and the fights. It was that in many regards I was compared to former relationships of them that they had, and I was made to feel less good. I wasn't as good as them, no matter what I did. Physically, I wasn't as good as them, as the previous partners. I wasn't as exciting in anything I did. I wasn't as good as the others. I wasn't as interested. I wasn't as whatever. Nothing I did was good enough. Until I then was good enough. Because most of those belittling arguments most of these belittling arguments were followed by then reassurance that I was great and the best. And they loved me, which they told me after a month we got together. Or no, not a month, a bit longer, but not much. They tested me on their own issues that they struggled with and how I reacted, and either one was wrong, because they had a preconceived way I had to go about these things. They didn't tell me, and then and some I of course didn't do correctly because I was just petrified of doing it wrong. So I didn't do anything, which of course was wrong. They let their anger with other people out on me. There was this one friendship they had with someone that was quite intense, and whenever they got into an argument, I could be quite certain that if minutes later there would be one between us, every single time. I said it once. They recognized it still happened. I was pressured into doing things they wanted to do instead of what I wanted to do. Like I said, they put me under so much pressure of not being good enough and not being correct that I, in the course of the relationship, the relationship lasted for, actually I don't want to say how long because that may give away who it was, so it lasted a while. In the course of the relationship, no, actually within the first months, let's say a year of the relationship. So it lasted longer than a year. There you go. I lost 20 kilos, which for the people that don't work with kilos is a bit more than 40 pounds. It got so bad I didn't eat for days. This one day I remember I stayed over. They had to go somewhere, but a bit of a rush, and I felt I was in the way, and I was so stressed about it that the food I ate came up again immediately, and I didn't eat for 2 days because I thought I was ill, but it was stress. Yeah. That should have actually been, I think, the biggest warning sign that I lost weight so much, because I struggled with my weight all my life. That's a different episode, but I am someone that had difficulty maintaining a healthy weight for a long time, and usually being on the overweight side, not the underweight side. And in that relationship, I was spot on. Even became skinny, even though I didn't want to and I didn't try. It just happened, which should have taught me something. Yeah, they were incredibly nice to me in front of other people, and then lashed out at me as soon as they were gone, or we were somewhere where they couldn't hear or see us anymore. They were super nice to me when they drank something, which sometimes made me look forward to evenings where I knew we were going to drink something, because it meant that I would, had some reprieve for a bit. Like I said, they made me think that I was not good enough sexually as well, or as a partner. My love language has always been to do things for people. For people that don't know, there's different types of love languages. That's how we show our love to other people. Some people are very verbal, and they give lots of reaffirming statements. I love you, you're great, I appreciate you. Other people do acts of service as their love language, which is what I do. It doesn't mean that you don't do the other things. Of course, just because your love language is verbal doesn't mean you don't do nice things for a person, but it's more the majority. And there's other types as well. I don't know them all by heart. That will be an episode at some point. So I've always been someone that does nice things for people. In that relationship, it became like my whole purpose, and I've taken that with me to an extent that isn't healthy in other relationships as well, where I just give myself up and don't draw good boundaries, because I felt if I do that, then I'll be not good enough anymore, and I won't be loved anymore, because that's what happened in that relationship. Every time I tried to draw a boundary that I thought was healthy, I was told it was wrong and it wasn't good enough. Every time I tried to do things in a sexually or romantic way, it wasn't the right time, it wasn't good enough, it wasn't good in any shape or form, which then led me in other relationships also to having struggled with that. And it's taken a while to get over that, a long while. And I wouldn't say that I'm over that as well, yet. And it's, since the relationship is over, it's I think longer now than the relationship ever lasted, so it's taken its toll. As you can see, I've gained the weight back though, which is good. Well, I don't know if it's good, because the word there they had then was, never mind, let's not talk about my weight. That will be a different episode, like I said. It's been, I don't know if I've shared everything. I don't know if I've made the relationship look worse or better than it actually was. It's all very confused in my head, because I'm still not sure that it counts. I'm still not sure that I wasn't the one that actually did all the wrong things, and it was all my fault, even though I've been told by other people that it probably wasn't. But yes, this is just my story. This is what I would like to share. There's more to it, but I just couldn't think of it all because my brain is also repressing some stuff. And it's more to encourage people that even if they feel like it might not be an abusive relationship, to still come and talk about it. And that because most of the people in my life back then, that's something aside, didn't know anything. They thought I was in a happy relationship because that's what I showed them. I didn't share it until years later, and I'm not sure if I've shared it with everyone yet. So if I haven't shared it with you and you know me personally, sorry. It wasn't because I don't like you. It's because it's easier to talk to an immobile object like this camera than to actually face a person that I have to explain this to you. But what I would trying to say is, people can surprise you because you may not know that their relationship isn't good, and you might not know that your relationship isn't good. And sometimes it's not just what we see on television, where people need to be beaten to a pulp to be valid as in an abusive relationship, even though that is horrible. Like I said, it helps. Talk about me. How did I actually get out of this relationship? Because that's something that lots of people struggle with. How do they get out of a relationship? I was fortunate that the circumstances presented themselves where there was, again, I don't want to get into too much detail because that would give away too much about who they are, maybe. I was fortunate that I managed to get out of the relationship. And the end of the relationship wasn't easy either. There was a lot of, I don't want to use the word terror, but that's what it felt like afterwards. But it's over now. And it wasn't easy because I was, as much as very early on from the relationship, I already thought about, this is probably not good for me and I should end this. But every time I thought about ending this, I thought about, oh God, I'm hurting them, even though they were hurting me, and I can't do this. And then it turned into not just I'm afraid of hurting them, because that's something, in every breakup happens, but actually I can't do this because I love them so much, because that's the hold they eventually had on me. I was fortunate that the circumstances presented themselves where this relationship ended. They don't for everyone, which makes it so important that people, if they can, talk about it, so that other people can give them maybe advice or help how to get out of this. There will be some resources in the description of this episode if you are in a position where you're not sure or are sure that this is a abusive or violent relationship that you would like to get out of. Unfortunately, there aren't enough resources. So the first step is always to talk to someone that you're close with, that you trust, that you know, or if you don't have any of those, you can at least talk to me, even though I won't be able to help you. I'm being upfront about this. I can't help you anyway, because you're probably living in a different country. But sometimes just talking helps to get perspective, or to find the courage, not the courage, but the momentum to get out of the situation that you're in. This was it. As I said, you feel free to contact me. There is the anonymous contact form on the website, but you can also email me at tim@men-tell-health.com, or on Instagram, MenTell Health _podcast, or on the website men-tell-health.com. I would appreciate it if you would share and rate this podcast. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, give it the likes, thumbs up, and whatever else you can do there. Follow me on Instagram to get information additionally to the episodes. And that's it for this week. As always, I see and I hear you, and I hope you see and or hear me again next week. Goodbye.